Our next speaker comes to us from Austin, Luke Beasley. I'm not going to do the introduction. This was set up by our communications chair, Sherry Godwin. She's going to introduce Luke.
Goodness, y'all are tall. Okay. I am starstruck. First, I'd like to thank Luke for coming. I have so many wonderful things to say about him, but I'm excited for him to speak, so I'm going to be quick. He's enormously talented political commentator. He has over 45,000 subscribers. Last I checked, is it
230, yeah.
230 now? Okay. And how many videos? I had over 2,000. It was 1,900 something. And they have been watched over a total of 42 million views at the time I checked that number. But he is growing so fast, y'all. Just look out for him. He is dedicated. He provides informative and thought-provoking content, and his expertise and approach in everything he does. I was thinking about how to describe him today, and I was thinking about my greenie. And my greenie is the most mild-mannered lady, never yelled, never hit a fly, so calm all the time. No matter if I was screaming, running around crazy or nothing, she was very calm. And Luke makes her look like she has anger management issues, okay? I don't know if y'all seen him talk. He talks to the MAGA people. And I don't know how he does it, because I'm already throwing stuff at the TV and yelling and screaming. But everyone, let's welcome our talented guest, Luke Beasley.
Hey everybody. As she said, progressive political commentator, so I'm coming to you sort of from the media world. And Sherry specifically asked, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. If I could speak to how you all can reach out to young voters specifically. We all know the importance, obviously, in the abstract of getting to Gen Z specifically, the youngest generation, but the how on that is still a big question mark. And even, so we see that in the data, but even interpersonally, I deal with a lot of people who have this, I don't know, politics, yeah, I know it is important, but they have a hard time caring enough to really dedicate their time and resources to that. So before getting into walking through my thoughts on that, my background is essentially super young, like too young. I don't know why my parents were letting me watch so much CNN as a kid, but I got super into politics super young, and so for years and years that's all it was, just a passion premised on the idea that watching my parents, who were both in sort of nonprofit work, growing up and dedicated a lot of their life to trying to implement change. The political system can do that, can change people's lives in a way that really no other system can, and getting involved in politics has the potential like no other endeavor does. And so that's where my original motivation to involve myself in politics came from. Then, thinking about how I can make a career of it, I realized I just really like talking about politics. Too much, most of my friends would say. And so I decided I would talk about politics on camera for a job, and it turned out very wonderful. So, as mentioned, prompted by Sherry, the question I want to address is how do we reach out to young voters? I think to properly have this conversation, I want to start with what the message has to be, because we'll get to pragmatically how do we reach them where they are, but what is the actual message once we get to them that we want to bring? And I see with the broader nationwide Democratic Party apparatus a lot of issues with that. So I know I'm speaking to the choir on this, but we are currently we're in now, 2024, the year of an election that is unprecedented, existential. Our democracy is quite literally on the line, and that's something, I don't have a percentage on it, but a massive portion of people generally, and young people especially, don't understand. A lot of times when I bring that into conversation, just casually, since it's such a given to me, democracy's on the line, in conversations with friends of mine, it's sort of like, okay, you would say that because you're such a liberal, but what's the real, situation of this election? But it's that real. And so in explaining that to people, I've found it helpful. On my show, I do this a lot, going through real specifically. First, let's look back. The leader of this movement, Trump, what is his track record as it pertains to our democracy? And the big thing to focus on is the different schemes he implemented trying to block the peaceful transfer of power. And some of this might seem so obvious to you, but something like the fake elector scheme, to me, obviously against the law. We'll let the courts figure it out as far as Trump's future on that, but seems so outside of our legal process, trying to bring together a slate of fraudulent electors, getting people who aren't the lawful ones to assert themselves to be, so that Trump could get Pence to say these are the real ones, and then justify him staying in power, or pressuring local officials to find him 11,780 votes, or all these different things. Then when all of them didn't work, inciting a mob to attack the Capitol, of course, to block the certification of the election. So something that basic, those step-by-step actions by Trump and his allies while he tried to stay in power, something a bunch of people don't understand. And the reaction even from some people front row here that I've gotten when I go through that is, oh my goodness, that's horrible. Obviously, if any president, taking the names away from it, tried to, outside of the legal process we have in place to challenge elections, just hold on to power, that would unravel our democracy. So that's the track record, looking back. Then projecting forward, he's pretty openly Trump, and then being supported by his movement, which is essentially now defining the Republican Party, openly campaigning on a pretty authoritarian platform. Again, something I'll continue to emphasize, a lot of people just don't get, no matter how many times you feel like you heard it. So openly calling for the termination of the Constitution, recently talking about the government needs to come down hard on media outlets he doesn't like, or his little joke, if you want to call it that, of being a dictator on day one, or pretty specific plans being put together by him and his allies to put loyalists in every single position possible across the bureaucracy so there's no pushback against him, and all these different things, openly promising to lock up his political opponents if he gets in office again as payback for him being held accountable for his violations of the law. So really outlining that as far as the message is super important. So that's kind of, if you think about it, the against column. Telling people over and over again in as stark terms as you can what's on the line in this current moment. And even as we look forward, we're thinking about this election, but going beyond that, we're going to be dealing with whatever the MAGA movement turns into for some time. And so remembering that this is what they're okay with currently. So I really hope we defeat Trump, and we still have more work to do beyond that if we do, because now we've learned such a large portion of the country is genuinely okay with something other than democracy if it comes in the form of, at least in this case, Trump. So that's against. But what I've found to be super important in communicating with young voters is it can't just be what are they voting against. You do have to outline what they're voting for. And if a small percentage of people really grasp the threat to democracy as posed by Donald Trump, an even smaller percentage of the country, I've come to learn, understands the results of the last few years of the Biden administration and Democrats. And so it's bringing to people, again, real specifically, first you have to know yourself the list of things I'm about to go through so that you can communicate to people and give them a for column. You have your against column, biggest thing there, threat to democracy, not to mention the threat to abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, the lack of a willingness to address gun violence, etc. But then you do have to have a for column. And so with Biden, I've been going through people, and again, the eyes always get a lot wider with people when I go through this. Obviously, he came in during an unprecedented crisis, and then brought us, you can attribute different levels of credit based on which policies you think were good and which weren't. But regardless, he oversaw an economic recovery that was that outpaced other comparable economies, which is pretty stunning and flies in the face of a lot of the, especially right-wing narratives about the current economy. And then while we were just trying to get back to normal, we were just trying to overcome the brutality of the pandemic and the economic situation that caused, still somehow he oversaw Biden and Democrats at large on the national level, American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, finally Medicare negotiating drug prices, and that historic investment in green energy, PACT Act, expansion of veterans health care, CHIPS and Science Act, real accomplishments. And again, when I go to people and talk about Biden, okay, they've seen clips of him having gaffes, they know his age, and a lot of times that's about it. And so that has to be communicated too, because the chief concern for me with my generation is not a lack of caring about these issues. They care a lot, more than I think, at least based on what my parents have told me, previous generations at this age have cared. A lot of caring, especially about issues like abortion rights and gun violence. But it's a belief that the electoral process doesn't work, that politics is broken, the system's broken. And day after day, you understand why people are having that feeling reaffirmed when you're seeing the chaos in Washington yesterday as an example that is so regular. So it's not just motivating people to care. That's there. It's convincing them that the electoral process is actually a way that change can be implemented. And the best way I've found to do that for people, to convince people of that, is going through the list of achievements, real specific. Let's talk about how prescription drug costs, the first 10 drugs that are being rolled out, how that's going, and then attributing that to the governance of Biden, Democrats, or on the local level, same thing. And so it's, again, the against column, super important, threat to democracy. We can't have any policy debates if we're not even living in a stable, functioning, democratic society. But then convincing people, once we avert that crisis, here are all the incredible things that could happen for them and for their communities, and that can happen through the electoral process. So that's the message. Now, how do you bring that to people properly? And I've seen, again, the Democratic Party apparatus more broadly getting a little bit better right now, but failing for the most part at properly reaching out to young voters. And the reason I think is because sometimes I see a sort of 1980s approach to 2023 politics in the way that voters are approached and reached out to. And so the sort of succinct phrase there is meet people where they are. And for young voters, that's primarily online. That's primarily on social media. And I know that's something you're quite aware of. And what I'm seeing now is a step in that direction from a lot of Democratic Party advocate organizations, but really learning about yourselves so you understand what you can do, and then implementing social media strategies to reach people, because every single time I've been in a conversation with somebody my age and asked them about their political views, if they have political views, my follow-up question is, and where were those informed by? Almost always, if not parents, then social media, TikTok, Instagram, etc. So really, even if uncomfortable or not something you're super familiar with, making an effort to reach out through social media to people, because you win the sort of media, social media, online game, and you win the messaging battle for sure. Of course, your traditional methods are still super important, in-person events, all that. But my call to action would definitely be social media. I can give specific things, very complex subject on that. If you'd like, I will do Q&A. But again, it's threat to democracy against real achievements for Biden as your message, and then work your tails off to reach out to people on social media and uplift, progressive political commentators like this guy over here, who are accumulating audiences, advocating on behalf of these views and on behalf of the Democratic Party platform. Any questions?
From a local standpoint, it's the local backdrop, Democratic apparatus, if you will. How do we have a social media presence, and is there a strategy around that? This is my first meeting, so I don't know anything.
I can brief you on that a little bit. Our communications committee, we're focusing on social media now. The gentleman sitting behind me, Nathan Banta, is on our communications committee. He's going to be in charge of running the scheduling program for social media. So we can sit down and put out posts for 2 months in advance, and they're all kind of branded the same. So we can start some of what you're talking about in Bastrop County. We really haven't done much to date. I mean, we had a Facebook page, you know, we have an Instagram page, but we don't really do anything with it, but we're changing that now.
Yeah, that's a ton of strategies, I think, how to actually get the accounts active and actually reach out and actually touch people. That's the world I don't know.
Yeah, I did jot down just quickly. Look at what's working. Every person I've seen in the space often blossoms into something unique, but start by looking at organizations that are doing it well and then emulate them almost exactly with just a little correct, switch out for your particular org and message. But emulate what's working. Don't try to rewrite the book on social media. There's a lot of information out there, free, available on YouTube, for example, about how to reach out to people and grow and all that. Social media tips that you can dive into. Then consistency, even if it's not working initially. For me, it was months and months of, working my tail off to get nobody watching it until it started working. Still be consistent and determined on that. And then the big things like branding and your message has to be strong. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, back in the old days, campaigns were run the conventional way where orders came down from on high, down to all the little groups working down here to grassroots level. And with Bernie running in 2016, that changed with relational organizing, which is organizing from the grassroots up. And it really took off under Beto when he ran for Senate. There were offices popping up all over the state that weren't even a part of his campaign. So how does social media tie into this relational organizing model?
So it's huge. I do think being willing to just pursue any and all strategies, trying to reach out to people. For example, I'm using myself as an example, it doesn't have to be me specifically, and seeing if they have any interest in collaborating, as Sherry did, but on social media platforms as well. And just, as you said, relationally, reach out to anybody and everybody. And because what we're doing, it's not just a business, it's not, it's something we're really all passionate about, I assume. And thus, other people with big platforms are often super passionate as well. And so they're willing to give that support. So I would say start pursuing relationships among other people with social media presences.
Okay.
I'll ask you a question. How do you get them to go vote? I know they're registered, they like to meet, they like to meet at coffee shops and talk and things. But then going there and voting is always challenging. I, however, have been a precinct chair several times. And there was this one poor young woman who changed her address, okay, and they wouldn't let the Republican group, because there's always two precinct chairs at any precinct, didn't want her to do vote at ours. She drove 30-some miles over to Giddings to try to vote, and they said, no, she's not on the roll, she's back here. And this poor girl, we let her vote, okay. I said, no, she's voting. I said, you are the poster child for voting, and she was fantastic, but she wasn't going to give up. But that's not the norm, and then, do we provide candy? I don't know, drinks, right? Pizza. What do we do? We will give you suckers or whatever, at the end of this,
I get worried increasingly because of all the new laws. If that crossed any lines, I don't know in Texas specifically where that stands now. Within the law, do whatever you can do to encourage people and to give people the resources to understand all that crazy stuff, which is your typical sort of voter suppression type stuff. You're making all these hoops because Republicans understand usually lower voter turnout benefits their candidates. So I would say on a large scale, individually, whatever you can do to help people make it happen. On a large scale, it's being ruthless and repetitive with your messaging. I think one of my friends says a lot, you know, the phrase facts speak for themselves is just so wrong. It's so wrong. They don't speak for themselves at all. And so we assume a lot of times as Democrats that people will see, right? The economy is getting better. They'll see and they'll vote for understand. And it's not the case. And so same thing with, I've even felt uncomfortable when I show repeating these same phrases over and over again because I'm like, surely people get it now. I don't have to keep saying this. But they don't, and you do have to keep saying it. And just every single, like your broken record, every single conversation has to come back to, and that's why voting is so important. And you can be a little intense with it. Like, choosing not to vote is choosing to put at risk our democracy. Do you really want to do that? Sherry, do you really want to do that? And so just over and over again, everything, any hopelessness, we're so angry at the MAGA Republicans, why are they obsessing and showing new photos of Hunter Biden or whatever? Everything comes back to, here's what you can do though, vote. Here's what you can do, vote, vote, vote. And just being aggravatingly repetitive, I guess would be my.
And I think what they think is they can only vote that one day. No, there's usually 2 weeks ahead.
Yeah.
They can walk in to any time. There'll be 20 of us waiting for you, that one poor person to walk in. And then, you know, so there's other opportunities and we're not, they don't seem to know that.
Yeah.
And I guess put it on the media like.
Education for sure. I know that's aggravating.
So it sounds like you're saying, like, for younger people, like, really appeal to their ability to make change, like their personal responsibility, and I guess like you're saying, like, you can be the difference in this, and really tapping into ownership of their power to do something, to make change.
Absolutely. And I think trying out different combinations of words and seeing which ones kind of resonate with people more. Meaning, everyone hears vote, vote, vote. You see vote signs everywhere. Explaining in terms that you think specifically to that person or to a group, if you understand where they're coming from, in terms that will resonate with them more. So, as an example, as Sherry mentioned in my introduction, I've done a bunch of interviews with Trump supporters, and David Pakman, a fellow progressive political commentator, will always say, so I've started saying the same thing. Watch these videos, okay, and then you're thinking, okay, we get it, there's some crazy people, what's your point? Then making the point that every crazy thing you just heard somebody say, or every demeaning thing you heard them say about different groups of people, or whatever it might be, that person gets more power in our political system when you choose to stay home. So for some people, that's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. If I stay home, somebody's got more power who I disagree with on some fundamental issues. So then just playing around with different combinations of words for different groups of people and putting it in terms, again, that aren't just vote, but you have to vote because you have the power, even though it feels like you don't, to move the ball down the field with politics. And one example I've cited, a lot of people know Lauren Boebert. I cite her election, the 523 votes or something, so that people understand, because they think millions, what else say, oh, millions. But these elections are actually coming down to narrow margin, especially in the electoral college. When it comes to presidential or these congressional races, Lauren Boebert, so narrow. Just a few people essentially could have turned out to vote and change that election. And the whole Beetlejuice thing never would have happened. Would have been great. So, yeah.
A lot of these, yourself included, like David Pakman, even possibly others included, it's all focused on the national level. How can we use social media to really affect on the local level that we're focusing on?
I was thinking about that too. This is not everyone's prescription, but this is my prescription because, again, of the world that I'm coming from. Put a lot of emphasis on the national. Not for every race, there's a bunch of specific things, but for kind of zoomed out approach to young people, you want them to care about the local, that's important. But I've convinced a lot of people based on the big picture that I outlined previously, and then they go in and they vote Democratic down ballot, right? If you can convince somebody of the binary choice they have right now, which I don't think it's necessarily always been like this, but right now, it's pretty simple in my mind, what each side stands for, and for a lot of people, easy to articulate why Unfortunately, this is a you choose one side situation, and you do just go with that team down ballot, even if you aren't familiar with the candidates. And I've found more success instead of trying to understand what do they care about. Just here's the big picture. You got the right, you got the left, you got MAGA taking control of this side, you got some common sense policies over here. Go into that ballot box and vote Democratic down ballot. So that would be mine, but other people would disagree.
Good question. We're gonna have to call it now.
Cool.
Thank you.